We all have something to share. KnolShare with Dr. Dave.
Hello and welcome to the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast. I am Dr. Dave A. Cornelius. I'm your host, affectionately known as Dr. Dave. So I hope everyone is prepared and getting ready for the holidays. And we're just winding down, our time. And I wanted to spend some time reflecting on my peer coaching experience through Reciprocoach. And we were talking about climate change coaching. And I was having these conversations with people from around the world. So I invited Babara Bates. She was my peer coach and she helped me a lot. And she couldn't make it today. But she also responded with some questions, which I will be happy to share as part of the conversations as well. I also invited Mary Rafferty, who was also another coach that I spent time with. And we had about 3 sessions. And we learned a lot from each other. So it was really great. It was a lot of great fun. And I hope I'm not screwing up Joel's last name. I want to pronounce it Twiselton. And I spent about 3 coaching sessions with her and having great conversation. We even went beyond the typical coaching, session. And so we were just sharing knowledge about different things and our different experience. So I'm just so grateful for Joel's openness to exploring and learning together. But before we get into our conversation, I wanted to start and try to define what climate change coaching is. 6 months ago, I hadn't a clue what climate change coaching was. And I was so unsure, but I went out and got some books. And through this time we spent together, I learned lots about what it is. But the best definition that I could find is that I use Google Gemini AI to synthesize its meaning. What's the definition of climate coaching? So I'm just going to read it. And it says, climate coaching is a form of coaching that helps individuals or organizations identify and implement actions to address climate change, focusing on personal and professional goals related to sustainability by guiding them through exploring their values, overcoming barriers, and creating actionable plans to reduce their environmental impact. Essentially, it's supportive process. It's a supportive process to navigate climate concerns to make meaningful steps toward a more sustainable lifestyle or business practice. So that's the definition. So with that, I'm going to bring my friend on, Joe. Hello, Joe. So good to see you.
Hi, Dave.
How's it going?
Good, thank you. All the way from the UK.
All the way from the UK. So good. I always start with the guests, asking them to, about a song or spoken word that's inspiring today. And some folks are courageous and sing a few bars, and some people just recite a few words. But you have an option to do either or maybe even both. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna give it up to you.
As it's got a little bit festive, even though we're like, I don't know, 2 weeks away from Christmas, unfortunately my head is full of Christmas music. So I don't think I need to be sharing that with anyone.
Oh, you're not going to sing for us, or you're going to read some words for us?
I'm probably going to read some words, and it will be from the Phil Spector Wall of Sound type of approach around Christmas. So I've been listening to what have I been listening to this afternoon? I have been listening to a whole CD of Phil Spector Christmas songs again, and this was back to back with Snoopy, Charlie Brown's Christmas album, which was recommended by a friend last week. So I'm well ahead on my festive music choices. So I don't have any words to share, Dave, but I have 2 very good music recommendations for anyone who likes their Christmas music.
Well, that's good. I woke up this morning to I don't know what this really says about me, but I woke up to this morning to the theme song, or it's not even a theme song. It's one of the songs that the Muppet shows play, and I was going, "Mana mana beep 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 beep, mana mana beep beep beep, mana mana beep 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 beep." Don't know what that really means or what's that saying about me, but that's what I got up to today.
And has it stayed with you all day?
It's gonna stay with me all day for sure.
Yeah.
So that's so great. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you?
So I'm what I call a human change specialist. So I've spent about 20 years working in predominantly organizational change, so big transformation spaces, and look at that through a leadership coach lens. That's one of the lenses that I look through. And it's all around how I help leaders and teams stay flexible from a mental, emotional, physical perspective so that they can keep delivering, executing, and sustain performance, basically, while all of this stuff is going on. And over the last sort of 5 years, I've increasingly been impacted, probably personally, by the whole climate change aspect, and been seeking ways to bring this into my work and how I can help organizations and individuals. So that's where we kind of came into contact through Reciprocoach. I've been exploring how I can do more of that, really, with my coaching and facilitation work.
Yeah, that's like I said, this is a fresh thing for me, and I got a lot out of this experience. So let's just reflect back for a second, and our climate coaching sessions, and let's talk about some key takeaways that you could that can directly influence sustainability kind of conversations within organizations. I know we had a lot of back and forth. How do we use this thing? How do we so I would love to also just get into that with you.
Yeah, I think our conversations were really interesting in that we're both coming at it, and like a lot of people that I talk to, what do I do? I need to do something, and there's almost like an urgency that I felt and still feel about how do we make this happen faster. And I think that was a really interesting topic of our conversation. Is you look at it from an agile perspective as well, which is a really great way of how do we keep that flexibility, because we're going to need to be faster, sprint, those sorts of conversations that we had. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from our conversation is that although you say that you're really early on in your journey, it's nevertheless, I think it's very human conversation about something that we have in common. And that was what I really took away. It was like, we're learning from each other all the time about how to make this work better.
No, and that's true. It was really interesting trying to figure this out, and figuring it out together was really an amazing thing. In conversations with you, conversations with Mary, conversations with Barbara. So I don't know, you probably had a coach as well that you were coaching, right?
Yeah,
How did that
Mary.
go? Huh?
I was coaching Mary.
Are you coaching Mary Rafferty as well?
Yeah.
And she never told me, and you never told me. Isn't that crazy?
No, that's a small world. It's a small
world.
coaching,
Wow.
reciprocoaching world.
The reciprocoaching world. Okay. So Mary got the benefits of both of our wisdom, or our whatever we want to call it. Yeah. No, it was really great. So I'm going to post a comment in, and I think you'll be able to see it. And this is from Barbara, and she sent me back her response, and what she was looking at is that that there's a huge body of knowledge already available to underpin such conversation. And she said, this can help overcome the feeling that there's just too much to do. It's too big, and it's too late anyway. And so she was just giving some examples of stuff that's going on in the UK with Prince William's Earthshot Prize, right? That's one thing. And then she was talking about the nuclear fusion project in Nottinghamshire, where
Yep.
she lives.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I'm trying to do is, since she can't be here and she was gracious enough to send some responses back, I'm just sharing that with us. And I'm are you impacted by any of this or any knowledge, any of this that's going on?
Yeah, I think the Earthshot Prize is probably something that, because it's Prince of Wales now, I think he is, Prince William, it's a very visible thing, and it's
Okay.
a very visible thing, and it's having a lot of traction in terms of visibility. It's on primetime TV on the
Oh,
BBC. I think it's this week it's on TV, and they're reviewing what they've done so far. But I think I completely agree with Barbara. It's just this feeling sometimes that it's like, okay, it's too late. What are we doing? But there is, once you start to see this stuff, like she's already outlined, the Earthshot Prize, at a local level, at a national level, and an international level, you can start to see that there's so much going on. And there's a whole piece here about having realistic hope and optimism without ignoring the fact that this is happening at pace. So it's that constant balance, and I think it is those meaningful steps that she's talking about that really make a difference.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you guys have that shared experience that you could add some comments to, some context. But when we this whole dialogue that sometimes we get into with climate change and sustainability, it could be rough, right? People get defensive and angry, and so how can we leverage like emotional and psychological insights or safety gained from the climate coaching to foster more in fact impactful conversation about sustainability?
I think from our conversations as well, Dave, it was really valuable for those fundamental coaching skills of active and deep listening. And if you create that space, if you can create that space for someone as a coach where they feel like they're sharing something that's really important to them, that psychological safety element, and you can then have a conversation, it's finding that common ground really that makes that psychological safety piece, and that you achieve part of it through that active and deep listening and the empathy, even if somebody's really not in the same headspace as you.
I mean, those are difficult, and it could be a grind, having to sit through, listening to someone either for it or against, the reality that, we are in a space where climate change is a reality. So what we do about it, it's a whole other conversation. How we go about it, it's a different conversation as well. But here's what Barbara said. She says, we need conversations we can explore with the other party rather than trying to convert them to our point of view. We do not want them to feel guilty, inadequate, or judged. We must respect where they are, accept their emotions and feelings, and encourage them to do the same. Emotions are data and must be acknowledged. We explore what they want. What would it look like if the climate problem was solved? Which is a really big question, and having set measurable goals and a vision, work backward from the desired future to elicit the necessary action. So, how does that sit with you, especially like trying to like give people that picture of if this problem was solved, this is what it may look like, and have them explore that.
So there's a really interesting question that you will have come across in coaching as well, around the what if question. So what if, and getting to the point where someone, depending on their way of thinking, whether they can visualize it or they can feel it, what that might look like or feel like, how it would sound. So what would that picture of the future look like if you had that what if type of environment, which feels like quite similar to what Barbara's saying about how can you tap in again, how can you tap into listen to what someone's saying and feel it and really be present for someone. So completely agree with her again.
Well, yeah, those are really great insights, and really just doing a yes and to what you said in terms of the what if. The other part of that is imagine if.
Yeah.
Right. To get them to really start to visualize in their mind space what this could possibly look like. And I just think that was such great insights from both of you. So when we think about the coaching process, right? So in what ways can the coaching process itself be a catalyst for encouraging green innovation and climate positive business practices?
So this is a really big question for me. Really big question. And I kind of went down a complete rabbit hole thinking about this. So for me, it comes back to listening again. What are we hearing and what are we sensing in the conversation? And you used the word climate positive business practice. So what are we listening for? What are we listening to? And then where is that fitting in a business context for the person that's in front of you? So moving sort of from the individual perspective into that business context almost.
Yeah. No, that's really good, because where Barbara went with it, she said a client-led process without any forced agenda can help unlock individual creativity. Questions like, what do you want to have happen? Which is a typical things we use in coaching, right? What would you like to have happen? If everything goes as you wish, what is that like?
Yeah.
Right. Very coachy questions. Where else have you successfully initiated and embedded a change like this? So it's the same thing. It's about inquiry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what came to mind for me is that I was thinking about that practice framework that I put together called the generative sustainability practice. And because I was so new to climate change in any conversation, in more of a structured conversation around coaching, as opposed to just having, let's make sure that we conserve this, so don't use more of that, or that type of conversation, but having a structured conversation, building something like the GSP, the generative sustainability practice, was really helpful for me, right? To start to think about green innovation and business centric type context to help people get to wherever their destination is. Maybe it's nowhere.
Yeah.
And just also having a great conversation with oh God, I don't know why I'm spacing on her name, from Eco Teens. She's Pragna. She's gonna punch me in the arm the next time she sees me. So it's just having conversations with her as well about some of the work that she's doing as a young person in the space has also been really helpful.
There's an element here as well, Dave, just reflecting on what you just said about how we help people get unstuck.
Yeah.
And getting unstuck and thinking differently can really help to unlock all sorts of different thinking.
Yeah.
And that's a really key part of what we do.
Yeah. And I like when sometimes we step out of the pure inquiry context and lean more into what I would call a form of partnership, and said, well, what about these tools? What about evaluating a couple different tools to help perhaps shape their thinking in some way, based on what whatever is going on in their mind as they're using this tool or pressing in against something. So I tend to like. I enjoy getting off of just asking questions and
Yeah.
going through the exploration.
Mm.
I'm sure you do the same thing when it comes to change, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a change management conversation as well, as we've
Yeah.
discussed. Say a little bit more about that.
So it was really interesting because I think that's the type of conversations that we had.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of exchange about experiences, perspectives, points of view. You were talking me through the GSP and how that had made a difference. And again, that's a different perspective. So it was as much about the inquiry, the listening, and the asking that inquiry questioning, but also about what you can learn from someone else.
Yeah.
Because none of us are experts in any of this. And
No.
the thing we are expert, or we're getting towards being better at, is human beings and
Yes.
how we relate to them. So
yeah, that is definitely our superpower for sure,
yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at some strategies from our sessions. Let's talk about what strategies from our sessions would you recommend for helping individuals and teens overcome resistance to sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, here's the $64 million question. Yeah. So it's a whole swathe of things, and this is where the change element comes in for me,
Yes.
which is looking at things from an individual perspective, but then pulling that up, chunking that up to an organizational level. So the individual perspective is you've got a group of people together in an organization, all having a different view on something, whether that's climate change or how an organization is going to change, full
Yeah.
stop, whether they're going to introduce a new piece of equipment or software. Everyone will have a different point of view. And how can you galvanize them together to move in the direction that's right for the organization? So I took away quite a few things in terms of strategies. I'm going to mention listening again, because that understanding where different people are coming from and their different perspectives, looking at those questions that we're asking and making sure that we have opportunities to make things feel easier. So sometimes, as you've said before and Barbara mentioned, it can feel like this in the perspective of climate change, can feel like a massive thing.
Oof.
But how do we make it easier for people to get into action? So thinking about that, thinking around that, and then making it relevant to everyone. And then the other piece that really came across to me from our conversations together was how important it is to have the right conversations and make that psychological safe space that you were talking about earlier, so that everyone can air. I'm making this sound really easy, but everyone has the opportunity to feel that they can share their own perspectives about this so that they can move forward. And it's recognizing that this isn't always about individuals, it's around the benefit for the organization and therefore the sustainability initiative that you mentioned.
Yeah. And also for the community. So I'm reading Barbara's response. She said, start by accepting the resistance and explore it fully, which is really a great perspective of using the client's language, right?
Yeah.
So it is there for a reason, to protect some aspect of the body-mind system. What is it doing for the person? How is it that I'd show up differently for each individual? It was really her context.
And it's a really good point, because each of us responds to situations and change in a very unique way.
Yeah.
We might go through the same processes as individuals or mental frameworks, but we all respond to it individually.
Yeah. And that's true. And so interesting. It's like you and I have we tried to look at organizations, and the way we approach organization is through the context of leadership, right? As we're going in their coaching, doing learning facilitation. So this question is centered around that, is how can the lessons learned from our climate coaching sessions, how that could be integrated into leadership development to better support sustainable transformation within the organizations.
So I'm quite convinced that there's a different way of thinking about how we do leadership development. It's probably too big a topic for this call.
Well, you could synthesize it into 10 sentences. I know you can't.
Yeah. So this making it really human focused, and just looking at this from that human perspective. Climate change is very loaded with emotional responses, more than, in my humble opinion, more than many other things. It can be on two ends of a scale, with people being very not so positive about it, or being real advocates and very passionate about it, and anywhere across that scale. So it's recognizing the importance in there around coaching skills for leaders. So how do they have better coaching conversations themselves, and recognizing much more those emotional responses to change that show up are 100 times. Understanding that is going to be 100 times better if you want to make change than it is to sharpen your process or your technology.
Yeah. And so you and Barbara, I think you guys spoke to each other. Do you guys know each other?
No, we didn't, but we should have.
Well, you should. I was just thinking, like, England, 300 square miles. No, I'm just kidding. No, you guys are on point, because she says focus on the whole person. And acknowledge the importance of self-awareness, especially for emotions, as you just mentioned, which I think is really important. I am a frameworky, buildy, solution-y type of person. So what triggered the generative sustainability practice was a thing that I call generative adaptive practice, which is something I built for leaders. And one of the principles, what I pulled over into GSP, is the abundance mindset, right? And that plays a big role in terms of leaders being open enough to hear what other people are saying, and realizing that there's a possibility, the wisdom of the crowd may have some contributions that could bring about change for the good, right? And so kind of like, me and my frameworky kind of mindset, kind of think about it in that perspective.
But that's a great way of helping people make sense of that, though.
Yeah, it's just giving people structure, because like we said at the top, this feels so big. Oftentimes you're like, oh my gosh, how do we solve this? And I said, how do you eat an elephant? Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I won't be eating any elephant. So
no, me too. So we're good.
You were good. Or maybe, how do you eat a giant pumpkin? How's that?
I'm writing that down. How do you eat a giant pumpkin?
I don't know. I was just trying to think what's similar to an elephant. That's the biggest thing that I think I've seen.
Yeah.
Vegetarian
wise, pretty much.
Yeah. All right. As explored in our coaching, what role do empathy and active listening play in facilitating this successful sustainability adoption? Those are two really important things for us as coaches. They're staples, right?
I think we've talked about this already as well. They are fundamental pillars of what we do. There's also I think Barbara mentioned it, around the self-awareness as a coach too. As to when you're responding, and your emotional awareness needs to be quite, we keep working on this as coaches, but our emotional awareness of where we're going and what sparks emotional responses in us in a conversation is really important too. So I think that empathy and the compassion, but also self-compassion to us and to our coachees as well, helping them understand how important that is as well. So it's a really big piece to explore, but it is absolutely fundamental. And active listening, where you're really in the discussion, and deep listening as well, where it's not about us, we're really focusing on what the coachee is saying is, and when we can get pulled out of that by our own thoughts, and recognizing that. So empathy, and for me, empathy and listening go hand in hand in this, that they are fundamental to a good coaching experience.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, I wanted to add to that is just observation, right, for the nonverbal communication, so that we're not only listening with our ears, but we're also listening with our eyes, and trying to understand what's going on with the coachee of that individual or group, because we may be speaking to a full group of people who are, dealing with this challenge.
And that actually, that's a really good point, Dave. It's when we're talking about adoption, it's recognizing where people are on that journey. And then, do we need to speed it up, or can we slow it down? And just so we've got everybody on the bus with us.
Or we use our agile context and do small increments of value,
go.
Right?
Yep, absolutely.
Trying to do the whole thing all at once. So so this is Barbara's response. She says, this is crucial in any coaching situation. When the person feels safe, is not judged, and does not need to defend their perceived lack, their energies can be released outwards to do what they become aware of that can be done. Yeah. Did you guys go to the same coaching school?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's a really good point about energy as well. It's the energy that you bring to the conversation, and that the coachee brings to the conversation. And also where we put our energy.
I mean, that's really important to help the conversations to move forward, or just for it to be productive, because you may not move forward, but you could have a very productive conversation that you end up like, you know what, I respect your thoughts and your perspective on this. It's okay if we disagree. You want to go have coffee, or want to go have a pint, or have whatever.
It's a really good point, Dave. It's such a good point that you make. We don't have to all agree all the time. We've got to get better at having conversations where we don't necessarily agree with everyone.
We don't all like the same teams, right?
No.
And we still get along. I don't stop talking to you because you're a Chelsea fan. Oh, did I say that? You're probably. I'm not a Chelsea fan. Are you a Chelsea fan?
No.
Oh, I figured you weren't. I made a wild guess.
No.
My brother-in-law is a Chelsea fan. I think he is. Yeah. So how can an organization translate, this personal growth and mindset shifts from, climate coaching into like this broader systemic change that can support green innovation and long-term sustainability goals? I'm just such a builder, a thinker, innovation person that I talk about innovation a lot.
Yeah. Can I ask what Barbara gave you this time?
Okay. She says, focus on the whole person and acknowledge the value of emotions. Ensure that those are at the top. Those at the top are really on board. I was expecting something different, but that was a very interesting perspective. That I'm copying it into the post that she and I can see why she responded to that question, because we're talking about mind shifts and broader systemic. It's like, how do we bring the leaders in. When she said focus on, ensure at those at the top, which are the leaders, are really on board with the proposed changes. So that's interesting. Thanks for asking her to read her response first.
Yeah, it's this unleashes a whole load of thoughts because the whole leadership piece is key, but there's some other elements as well, because those leaders set the tone for the whole organization, as you know.
Yeah.
There's another element in here that I was thinking about, which is how how individuals in organizations influence and develop their influencing skills to support this agenda as well. So, and that again takes into account the more human aspect of this, around how do I have better conversations? What do I want? Thinking about what I want to achieve from those conversations. What's my goal? And again, some of those questions that you mentioned earlier about what would it be like? Let's imagine if, as a group, that we take those personal mindset elements to that abundance mindset and translate that through that thinking around the systemic perspective and what influence do I need to have in the organization to make some of this change happen, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily start from the top.
And that's a very good point. And as you were speaking, my mind just, are you familiar with open space technology or open space practices?
No.
Or
maybe even open source, yes, but not open space.
Open space or future search?
No.
Okay. So there's this whole, I am like such an agilist, right? And so when I think of systems, I was thinking about this practice where, a group of people come together and each person will come up and propose a topic. And when I'm thinking about leadership and how they could bring a facilitator into the space and they themselves participate, and everyone puts up a sign and said, we're going to be a convener. And then they have these small little conversations, about 50 minutes, 30 to 50 minutes. And then the convener is responsible for capturing all of that information and bringing it back to the group, so the whole system learns from. So you may, let's say you have 20 people, you may have 20 topics and they decide to talk about 5. So people are going to go to different sessions and have great conversations. So I was just thinking of, what you said, making sure those at the top are really on board, right? And how do we bring them in a way that they could actively participate and not sit there and judge? They have to bring their voices, they have to bring their brains, they have to literally get involved in the process because they're part of the system.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is absolutely part of the system. And the whole piece that you see in change, where you don't engage people, where you do it from the top, you will have seen this in Agile over and over again. If you don't take people through that process, they feel like it's being done to them. And you can get that without doing that process of involving leaders either at the same time. So they've got to be part of understanding that process as well, in my book. But I love that idea that you've just talked about, Dave. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. And it actually was, this guy found, he was in a Peace Corps, right? And he went over to, I think, West Africa, and he saw how they solve problems using this model. And and he looked at other cultures as well, in India, and also the natives in the United States, the Native Americans, and saw that they use similar type systems where they would bring problems to the group, and the group would have conversations of how do we resolve this. And it's not one big conversation, it's many small conversations that are taking place. So if you get a chance, look up open space technology. It's a lot of people use it as what we call a anti-conference.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the same model, kind of.
Unconference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love an unconference.
Oh yeah, unconference. So anti-conference is unconference. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, so in closing, anything you want to just leave with the audience or leave for the world? Because I'm probably going to send this recording off to the reciprocal coordinator. Said, hey, we were
Ooh.
talking about reciprocal coaching, we talk about climate coaching, right? So anything you would like to leave the audience with?
I think the real standout for me from our conversations, there were two really big things that stood out. One was the nature of our coaching conversations, in that we had a very broad discussion. So it was coaching and probably a bit of mentoring on both sides. So that was the first thing. It's understanding and being conscious of the types of conversations that you're having, particularly around this topic. And the second thing is around this innovation piece that you've mentioned. Yeah. So there's innovation in the way that we do things, but there's also innovation in the way that we change our ways of thinking. And that's where I think that coaching can play a huge role in helping anyone to do that, including coaches. So how do we broach difficult topics and have those open conversations and provide a space where people can have them? And I guess, although I said there were two things, there's one more thing, that for me, climate change is it is a little bit of a technology problem and a weather climate problem, but it's a big human problem. And I think where there's a challenge, and I think that's where coaching can really help.
I would agree with everything that you said, that it's important for us to have the conversation, but have it in a productive way. In a part of it is technology, but the impact is really to human beings and our other partners, the other animals that lives and plants that live in this earth. And the reality is, and as I've wrote about this, is that the earth would be fine. It's the humans who are not going to be fine, right? The earth has gone through many years of transitions and different types of change in climate, and maybe that's why we don't have those big animals around walking around trying to eat us from the top, right? So it's the earth will be fine. It's the humans who won't be, and so we have to get each other to think about this in a responsible way, or maybe even an innovative way, as opposed to just using the word responsible. How can we be more innovative in thinking of just how we're going to solve some of these things if they can't be solved at all?
No.
Well, good. Hang on for a second. Let me close. So thank you for joining us for this podcast episode. Asking the question, what did we learn from climate coaching, peer coaching sessions? So I want to thank Joe Twiselton, and thank you for agreeing to share, what we learned on this topic with this community. I just want to tell you that the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out my latest book, Generative Leadership to Thrive, and the incredible story of Ashanti Mwendo series on Dr. Dave Duca. These books are also available on Amazon.com, as well as on audio, Kindle, and print options. But I have another book that I've been talking about called Deliver Value. I guess if I could get it right. You could also check that book out too. It's just another book of how do we deliver value for organizations and for our people. And with that, I want to say have a great Christmas season, because this is the last episode for the year for the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast. So until then, I was funny. I got up singing Mana Mana this morning with the Muppets, and I just remembered a friend sent me an email, and it has TTFN, Tata for now.
We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.